Thanks, Felicia. Hey guys, happy Friday. It's gonna hit the buttons here. All right, welcome to our all about seed beading intro for beginners and seed bead lovers who know been at this a while. Welcome, and we're just gonna jump in and just start talking about seed beading. And so to kick it off, I thought I would just introduce like what are seed beads and what are those intricate fabric looking stitches that people are doing. For anyone who's new and has not done any seed beading, it can seem like something that is maybe too hard to get started. Maybe it looks a little too detailed or it's just too small. All of those things, I promise you, are a lot less daunting than they look like at the first glance. Underneath the hood of seed beading, it's really actually intuitive and pretty easy and quick to learn. And it's also very satisfying because once you've picked up these skills, and it's really just a few little things here and there that you pick up, all of a sudden you can make all this stuff. And people see it, they're like, wow, you made that. And you're like, yeah. And they don't believe you when you say it was easy, but or maybe you tell them it was really hard. I don't know, you could do that too. But yeah, it's something that is not as hard as it looks. That's the best way to sum it up. Not as hard as it looks, but when you are creating something that's very intricate looking, it can be just so rewarding. So next week, we're teaching a great example of something that in and of itself, each of the steps, it's not difficult. Each step is something that you can learn very easily. And with practice, you get even better and better, but the result is wow, right? And so this is what got me hooked on seed beading. It's the wow factor of taking something very simple as just a little round bead and creating basically anything you want, right? The other thing to think about with seed beads is that with so many other crafts, including beading with larger beads, you're really kind of limited to what somebody already made. So like somebody made that beautiful flower bead and pressed that glass for you and produced that product for you, and they did the colors and they did all that. But with seed beading, the palette feels more to me like what you could do with crayons, right? It's more you, because you can do your own patterns, you can do your own color palettes, you can mix up sizes, you can do your own structures. And so that to me is like a level up in design. So I thought I would just jump in and talk about, well, so the most confusing thing when people are first starting is like, what are seed beads sizes and what's the difference between them? Why does that matter? What do the numbers mean? And so if anyone has questions about that, we're going to go into a little detail here. So just to start, some of the size of seed beads that you'll see most commonly, you'll see 11-0, 8-0, and 6-0. Those to me are the ones that if anybody's selling seed beads, they're going to probably have those three sizes. If they have some extras, you may find that they have really small ones, like 15-0. And the pattern here is the large number is the smaller bead. And it's just reversed. So a little history on this. I'm just going to read real quick. Why is it marked as number over 0? And what does that mean? I actually didn't know. So I looked it up. I kind of thought maybe it was like, to my mind, it would make sense if the number was indicating, the 0 indicated it was a circle, meaning like if it was an oval, you'd have two numbers, but that's not actually what it was. It is a reference to the manufacturer's base size or aught size. So how seed beads are made, they start from what would have been a base size, and then they're made from that. And so the number above is roughly equivalent to the number of beads in an inch if you were to lay them out whole side up. And that's important because that's not the strung measurement. That's the measurement you would get if you laid them out flat and the whole sides are pointing up. But that's super helpful for a couple of things: peyote stitch and looming, and any other stitch really where the whole side runs the side. So for example, if you're producing a peyote stitch product, this is what the side's going to look like, and this is the measurement you're going for. That's peyote and this is loom. So that measurement here, 11 beads per inch if you're using 11-0. If this was 8-0, it could be 8 beads per inch. It's an approximation. It's not going to be perfect, but it's really, really close. And over a 7-inch bracelet, it's really close because those variations kind of absorb each other, I find. And so some of the things to think about when you're trying to choose what size you want is what kind of project am I doing? What's my skill level? So 11 is going to be the size most people are using for a lot of the projects out there. But it is not the easiest size to learn with. If you're brand new and you want to try stitch for the first time, I always tell people to use an 8/0. And that's because, and I'm going to show you guys actually the beads a little closer, and it'll help explain the differences here. So I'm going to hold them up. Over here is the 6/0, and over here is the 11/0. And in between, you're seeing an 8/0, sorry, an 8/0 is here. And then this is a 10/0. So a 10/0 is a more commonly found in a check seed bead. And I'm going to get into brands and stuff just coming up here. But what to know is that it's right in between an 11/0 and an 8/0. But you can see how an 8/0 might be just a little bit easier to work with. And it's going to work up faster. So as you're stitching, you'll get done quicker and you'll be able to kind of see like, oh, thanks, Alicia. You get a more satisfying result as a beginner because it takes a while. This is kind of like, I put it in the family of like knitting and crochet when it comes to the results time, right? The amount of time, it's very rarely instant gratification when you're doing seed beading. It's something where you're going to enjoy the process more. And then your end result is going to be so beautiful, and it's so worth the time. And I actually enjoy the part of like making the items, like even though they take a long time, it's something that like I find kind of meditative, helps you wind down, helps you focus. It's like a mind mantra kind of thing. So for a lot of people, that's how seed beading is, and that's why it's so appealing. So an 8/0 for beginners, that's what I always tell people. All stitches can be done with an 8/0. You can learn with it really easily, and then take that knowledge and move down. Start making stuff with the 10/0 and 11/0 sizes, and those results will look very tiny and intricate. Now, what I don't have here are tubes of delicas or things larger than 6/0. This is a size 6, and they just start getting bigger from here. And I know it's hard to communicate scale over the camera, but a 6/0 seed bead is about the equivalent of 4 millimeters. Roughly, right? And then you're moving down from there to where you're down to like 1 millimeter. I also don't have on my mat here a size smaller than 11, but there's a size called 15/0. It's really tiny and it's super handy for things like embellishing, and it's used in a lot of bead weaving patterns because it can be a great connector bead, a filler bead, and sometimes it's just the right size you need to connect something or make a circle work. Or so all of that stuff, you get into that later as you get going, which will happen quickly. You'll be surprised. And then the only other bead I don't have out, but I have a sample, are delicas. Now delicas are a different kind of bead. They're a cylinder shape, and I've been focusing primarily so far on round beads, but there are a brand of beads out there that are shaped like a cylinder, and they're called delicas. They're made by the company Miyuki. We're going to talk brands in just a sec. And that company makes this precision cylinder. They call it 11/0 delica. So it is a different size than an 11/0 round, and that's an important thing to remember. An 11/0 round is going to be not only a different shape, but a little bit bigger than an 11/0 delica. Okay, so before I jump into brands, are there any questions about seed bead sizing? I know I went really super fast, and there's a lot more to say and answer if anyone has any questions. Looks like, so, and Carmi will jump in anytime if she sees something on the chat that I missed. I can sometimes see it, but my lights often block the chat box for me. So let's jump into brands in case anyone has any questions about that. Just ask them in the chat. We can always jump back. Okay, so I'm gonna just bring this over. These are the main ones. Now, these are not all the brands out there. There's a lot of seed bead brands, and there's new ones coming up all the time. I see all kinds of cool like brands that I want to try. I feel like this is an area where you're going to see some growth in the years to come. But these are the ones I've worked with the most, and they're the ones that are easiest to find on the market currently. And the ones that I had in my hand a moment ago that I was showing you are made by the company Preciosa in the Czech Republic. And these are the beads that are in our 3-pack palettes, and that are also in the wall where we have seed beads for sale, like the the main Michael's wall has all of the colors I'm showing here, and they have the like the small size all the way up to the big size. So that company makes this brand of Czech seed bead. There's another company in the Czech Republic that makes seed beads, and they also make shaped beads. The most famous of which you've probably heard of is the Super Duo. This is the company that makes Super Duo. They also do make some round seed beads. They make a bunch of other cool shapes like ginkgos, and they make nib bit. They make the, there's another one that's really cool, Rula bead. So cool to check out. Preciosa also makes a bunch of other pressed shape beads, things like pit beads, drops, embellishing components. They have so many like things like chili beads, and you could just go to town. We'll talk about 2-hole and shape beads in more detail a little bit later, but these are the companies that make those. And then Miyuki and Toho beads, they are Japanese seed beads, and they're known for precision, particularly the Miyukis. They're very, very precise, very even. The colors are outstanding. And in both cases, they have what I like to call continuity of color. So what you'll find with Toho and Miyuki is that you can get the same color in all of the sizes. And sometimes they'll even cross over into like the delicas. So Miyuki, again, is the company that makes these precision cylinders. And I believe Toho has some of their own, like the Aiko and the Treasures. Those colors correspond across all of their sizing. So it's kind of cool because you can match your stuff up really well and know that it's going to be kind of like you don't have to worry about dye lots. Like if you're into yarn, you know what I mean? So you buy what you need on the spot because you know later it's not going to be. With these companies, you don't have to worry about that. You can buy it when you're ready and it will match what you bought 2 years ago. Let's see. Sizing. I want to go back to sizing relative to brands. Okay, so, and this is all in the handout, so you guys don't have to memorize it, but I have found that there's a really big difference between brands with size. The good news is that sizing, the real variation turns up in its width. So the width versus the diameter. So whole side up, the variation is not too bad. And I'm going to show you some samples, but just in general, your diameter whole side up is going to vary very marginally, but your width can be very, very, very off. So Czech's going to be your smallest, and the biggest beads are going to be the Toho. And those, I mean, there's just generally, I'm summarizing across all of their different coatings. And so, definitely not a set in stone thing, but that's just a general thumb to kind of go with like what's going to change and I have a sample to show you. So recently I did a stitch up on the loom. So this is a loom project. And these two brands are Toho and Miyuki. Same pattern, same number of rows, same number of columns, everything is the same. The only difference is that's Toho and that's Miyuki. Notice they're the same length. Well, the Miyukis are just smidge shorter, but not too much, right? And that's because the variation here, this number here, which is going to be the length you get this way, is not as variable as its width. So that's if you were to string it measurement, right? So if you're stringing seed beads, you're going to get a lot of variation between brands and the length that you just strung for the same count of beads. That matters a lot if you're making a fringe design. So if you say, I want to string one strand with 30 Toho and one strand with 30 Miyuki, you're going to get a different measurement and it's going to be off. This is a 13 column design and it is off by 2 whole seed beads in width. So that's a huge difference. Now, if I was to try to combine brands and do Miyuki with Toho together, I would get a wavy effect. It would kind of do all these things. And so that's just something to think about when you're a brand new person. It can be super, super frustrating if you went and just bought the colors you wanted and you're putting it together. You might be like, okay, so I think I need to, stop doing this because I'm not getting a flat result, right? The reason is probably that you mixed brands. And I did that a lot as a new person. And that's something that I can share with another new person that it really helps when you're brand new. Now you can combine them and when you get experienced, you can start playing with that. But at the end of the day, you can get the most beautiful results just by sticking to the same brands together in designs like this. There are other designs where that doesn't matter. particularly round stitches. Like if you're doing things like round netting, as long as you're consistent with placement, you may be okay doing that with these mixing up the brands. But anyway, I hope that helps somebody just to see that that's out there and be aware of it. And then the other thing I was just going to throw out there is that if you are working and trying to decide between using a check 11-0 or a check 10-0, and you just kind of can't decide which one you want to go with, if you're working with a pattern and it says to get 11-0, 90% of the time you can also sub in a 10, especially if that pattern doesn't specify that you're using check seed beads, if it just says any seed beads, because again, your 11-0 Japanese are going to be about the same size as the 10-0 check in width. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to decide, can I sub this? Can I sub that? And then of course, my answer to everyone's question is, oh, can I use a such and such? I always say yes, unless it's really way off, because how do you know it doesn't work until you try it, right? And if it doesn't work, you've lost nothing. Take it apart. Beads can be reused over and over and over again. And then all that learning is part of your knowledge base. So always try it and see if it works for you. Okay, let me see if I missed anything really quick. I talked a little bit about what the most popular size out there is, and just tends to be 11-0, but that can change. It's just everyone I've asked recently, and most of the current research shows, you know, and things like sales, that 11-0 is the lead right now. 11-0 being the size that you see here in these beads. Okay, let's jump along.
Danielle?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Carmi. Hi, I just wanted to just give you some feedback.
So yeah,
thank you so much. Most of us agree that's the best visual we've ever seen for showing size differential between brands. So thank you very much. And thanks. I think if anything, it'll encourage people, you know, to keep their brands together. So if you're a person that, you know, takes them out of the vials and pours them into storage, I think now you've urged people to keep their brands together so they won't have any mishaps when they're beading later. And then you did just say how popular 11-0 is. And Jessica just typed the question I have. Do you think that 11-0s are the best for fringe earrings?
I do, yeah. 15-0 is beautiful too, though, and they can look very amazing, but you're going to get the results from 11. So here's an 11-0 Delica. Let me show you some 11-0 round in fringe. I can even show you the ones I'm wearing, because those are made of 11-0. And by the way, everything I'm holding up is going to be a class, or is already a class. So you can, all these projects are out there. Here's Delicas, and here's 11-0 Miyuki. And the ones I have on here, these are actually also Miyuki. So these are round, 11-0 round, 11-0 round, and then 11-0 Delica, meaning it's a cylinder shape.
Jessica would like to know, do you think 8-0 is too big for fringe?
We were actually just joking about that beforehand. I have taught fringe with 8-0 before because it's easier to see over a Zoom platform. And I wasn't expecting it to be something that I would be into. And then I actually loved them. They were really amazing. I can probably dig up the photo too. I know right where the photo is. I can post it later. We did a class, a fringe earring class, and I used 11-0 check. But to teach it, I taught it with the 8-0. And I ended up wearing those for days. They were so cool. And it was the same pattern. Of course, they were much, much bigger, right? But then what's wrong with a statement earring, right? So I know It was really cool looking.
And Cindy just pointed out, you know, of course you can use 8-0s in a fringe, and then maybe to pick a pattern that wasn't so wide. So it, you know.
Yes.
Like long and thin would be awesome.
Yeah, like something maybe, and we can talk more about this when we get into stitching, but something with 11 columns or less would be ideal for an 8-0. When you start getting into the really wide ones that are like 13, 14, 15 columns wide, it's going to bend on you. With a larger bead, it's going to start to do that while you're wearing it. And then, the other recommendation I would also make, if you're going to do 8-0 fringe earrings, when you build the brick stitch part, you want to build that with a thicker thread, something thick, but then switch to a thin thread for the fringe part. So it's flowy. But I think the main way to get a top like this to be stiff and hold its shape is to have it be filled with the thread so that it'll stay in, in position when you're wearing it and not be like kind of bending on itself. And 8 is going to do that a lot more. So if you fill it up with a thicker thread on the brick stitch part, your fringe with a smaller thread, you'll be good. Yeah, and so we'll talk more about stitches in general coming up here real quick. I'm just going to very quickly glaze over because this isn't something that I can, I did some research and I don't think I can name them all even in a book. There's so many shaped beads. The thing about shaped beads is it's kind of a sport with seed beaders who really get into this craft. It's a sport for us to see what we can do with all the different shape beads. And getting a new shape bead to a seed beader is like getting a new book to somebody's book club. I mean, it's just like, oh, what am I going to do with this? And then there's this explosion of patterns and all these ideas from people. And then the tried and trues still used all the time, every day out there. And so some of the most common, the ones that you will see a lot, are the 2-hole super duo or twin. And the difference here is this is the Matubo super duo. This is the one that we have in Michael's, and it's the one that's most used. There's also a 2-hole version called the Czech twin bead. It's also the same kind of bead. It's a 2-hole bead, but it's a smidge smaller. The hole diameters are a little more forgiving, and it doesn't have that little pinch at the top like super duos do. But all these shapes can be easily researched, like online. You can check them out. And then here we've got the what I like to call diamond and gem duos. They are a different bead, but they look really similar. So I actually find them to be somewhat interchangeable as well. But the finishes are different because they're from a different manufacturer. Square beads. There's a lot of different kinds of square beads out there. So some of the square beads are tilas, and that's made by the company Miyuki. There's also Czech tiles. And I hear them called a lot of different things, but you see them a lot in, I used to love using them in leather wrap bracelets, but they're a little thicker and they're like a Czech pressed 2-hole square bead with little rounded edges on. Really beautiful. And then earlier I mentioned Rula and brick beads. So these are going to be your checkmate brick and your Matuba Rula. These are similar but different. These are more blocky, a little smaller, big with a little rounded edges. So these little differences can make really pretty results, depending on what your goal is. Like if you want something more organic or something sharper. And often you'll see these combined with, into designs with seed beads. So they'll take this bead and they'll stitch around it with a smaller seed bead. And this is where, when I'm saying this is a sport, this is like, we live for this stuff, right? We're like, oh, show me a new shape bead. I want to try it. And I am a sucker for a new shape bead. One comes out and I have to buy it, right? I really love 2-hole cabs. And there's a bunch of these out now. The ones that I am most familiar with are the ones from Preciosa Ornella. They have an oval shape now, and they make a bunch of these with like flowers impressed on them because it is a pressed bead. So it comes out of a mold and you can have shapes. So, and I think there's some more brands floating out there that are called rosettes, and it's a different company, but still very cool. All right. And then, I didn't go much further into the lists. I just listed kind of the ones that I think were the most different from each other so that you can get a general idea. But like things like crescent, can you see how cool a shape like this, like the potential that this gives you in a design? And as you get into this, it'll become something like, or you'll just like, oh yeah, I could do this, if that works, then this will work, or that will work. It's try it in a loom, try it in a peyote piece. It's amazing. So mainly what I was focusing on there are beads with 2 or more holes in the shape or pressed design. But don't forget about regular round beads. So regular round beads that are the ones that really stand out to me are fire polish. And fire polish is an interesting way to describe a bead, but they're a round bead, but they have faceting. And the finishes on a lot of these beads are like very stunning. So those are often used with seed beads in bead weaving designs. Of course, pearls, and our favorite, crystals. We love crystal bicones, crystal rounds. We do a lot with those in our classes. And then don't forget gemstones. You can stitch gemstones in your seed bead designs too. So yeah, fire polish plus facets. And who doesn't love some sparkle, right? And yeah, so that is not everything, in no way comprehensive, but the ones that stand out to me and the ones that I thought that, kind of gave you a more well-rounded impression of like, what is a shaped bead, what's a 2-hole bead, and what other kind of beads do you stitch up with seed beads. So there's those. Yeah, and Cindy is saying she loves fire polish beads. I do too. I really love them. They come in a lot of great sizes. So actually, that's worth mentioning. I didn't think to write it here, but one of the really cool things about fire polish beads is the precision measures. They come in sizes as small as 2 millimeters, some called true twos, and then they go all the way up to like 12 millimeter. That's very handy because you can, reliably know what size it's going to be next to a seed bead. You can kind of, do your designing from there. And so, yeah, so we've been talking about designs and in your stitches. Well, here's the stitches, the main ones, the ones that we keep using over and over again. And all of these stitches are they've been taught and taught and taught and taught again. There's all kinds of different styles, but the methods are mainly the same. So if you learn peyote stitch from one teacher, you're probably going to have the same, knowledge as from any teacher, right? Because this is a stitch that is it's out there. All of these are. Peyote stitch is the one I started with because as I think I said somewhere also in here, it's the most popular stitch. It's the one that a lot of people learn it first when they first start seed beading. It's also just the most versatile. And one of the reasons it's a favorite, my opinion on why it might be a favorite, is because of the ability it gives you to create patterns with pictures. So you can color block, you can do like a chevron stitches, or you can make actual like pictures of things and do your own designs. And so peyote stitch is great for that because you can do that. And you can also get like rope configurations. And I think I talked about down here, all of these stitches can be done in a rope configuration, meaning they can be done in the round. So similar to like crochet and knitting, where you can do it flat, you can also do these in the round. I think there are a lot of similarities, honestly, between crochet and knitting and seed beading. So in concept, so right angle weave is another super, super popular one. It's also really, I would say it's beginner friendly. The only thing about right angle weave that makes beginners get a little bit like, they get a little frustrated when it doesn't stay in a circle shape because it opens up again. And we can talk about, how to help that not happen. The number one way I do that is to reinforce, and we're going to cover terms. So that's coming up. Then of course, ladder stitch. Ladder stitch, I put that really high on the list because that one is the base of a lot of stitches. If you're going to start doing brick stitch or herringbone, you're going to do a ladder first. So that one is super important stitch to learn. Herringbone is fun. It's not essential, but it's one of my favorites. It's like a zigzag, and I can show you a herringbone piece that we're teaching coming up. And herringbone is called that because it makes kind of like that little fishbone pattern where there's a little V shape going on. And here's an example of mixing up sizes and why having a different size seed bead handy for different applications is so cool. Because here's 8/0, right? And then all of the colorful beads you see are 6/0. And the beads on the side are 11/0. And you put them all together and you get something amazing. The whole thing is just herringbone the entire time, with the exception of a ladder stitch start. And they just go from there. What else? So square stitch and looming. The square stitch and the loom stitch are in appearance the same, but they're created a different way. Square stitch is off loom, and it's made by, you would make a row, and then you would attach individually each bead to it. Or you can get a loom and you can create pieces like this. And again, this is really cool because you can take graph paper out, draw your pattern. It's 100% you, totally your design. This is your sketch, and you just go from there. Stitch it up. It's pretty easy because you're just picking up the entire rose beads all at once and then attaching them all at once. So that's really fun. And then I mentioned a little bit about rope stitches, but a lot of these become beautiful in the round, and we call those rope stitches. So example, peyote can be done in 2 different ways in the round. You can make tubes, or you can do the round stitch. You can do right angle weave as cubic right angle weave or prismatic right angle weave. You can take herringbone stitch and do that in the round and get a really beautiful result. The same square I don't do as much in the round or looming, but Theoretically you could, but the main ones that you're going to be doing in the round are those top ones there. Or last but not least, netting. Let's turn over here. So I'll go back to spiral rope, but netting stitch is another one that can be done flat or round. But in a round configuration, we've done quite a few of these where you can embed larger beads, and you can also make shapes with netting. Netting is the stitch that you use if you were going to make a flat mandala, or if you were going to cover up a Christmas ornament or an egg or something like that. So the potential here is huge. So many things you can do with net. Spiral rope's a little different. Spiral rope starts with a base row, and then you're adding seed beads around that base row, so it's not hollow, whereas all those other rope stitches, including the netting stitch, are going to be hollow. A spiral rope stitch is not hollow, so it's I kind of think of it as a separate category for that reason, but the look is kind of similar. All right, so I know I just like sped through that, but that's in general, at least in my opinion, the main stitches out there that beginners would want to pick up. There's certainly others, but it gets crazy. There's lots of other stitches out there. Yeah, and so you know, I don't think we have time to demo every stitch today, but if there's one you guys want to see, maybe once we get through the rest of the handout, I can jump back and we can start a few just to show. And then of course, I'm going to talk about how do I learn, where can I see all this? I'm going to talk about that here coming up. But I wanted to cover really, oh yeah.
Sorry, Danielle. Hi, it's Carmi. I just reinforce what you just said. You're great for time.
Okay.
I don't have any additional questions for you, and it's good for you to move on. It's good.
Keep going. Okay, yeah. I'm just like, where's the questions, guys? Awesome. Okay, so tools. Something I really love about seed beading is you really don't need that many tools. It's a really travel-friendly craft. So if you have some thread, a needle, and a tube of seed beads, you can entertain yourself for like a couple hours just with that, right? And you might need some scissors, but even if you don't have your scissors, you can, I've used nail clippers before. I mean, if you get desperate, there's stuff you can use. But it can get more elaborate if you really want to get into the craft and learn what all the different kinds of beading needles are, all the different kinds of beading thread. There's designer scissors, of course, because, you know, there's a market, there shall be a product. And beading mats are really cool. This is a beading mat. We actually got asked that a couple times. What's that foam thing that she's using? Well, these are at Michael's, and they are, honestly, they're blankets. I think they're like the same thing as those really nice warm fuzzy blankets, but they're cut into the shape of like a food mat, like a place setting mat. And they're essential because then when you pour your beads out, they don't go rolling away on you. If I was to have done that on this surface, they would have just rolled off the desk and been all over the floor. So that's why I like these little foam mats. There's all kinds of other mats out there, but you know, for a few cents, you can just grab one of these and it's all you need. And then some of the optional tools, and there's a lot of optional tools, but the one that I've been showing samples for is bead looms. So bead looms are cool because they hold the threads in place for you to place beads under, and then you stitch under, over, under, over. And it's essentially kind of the same way of like making a textile. You're just doing it with adding a bead. And it's something that we've done classes on too, so we can point you to those. But let's talk a little bit about thread. So thread is it's kind of a thing you become obsessed with if you get into seed beading. And the reason is because there's so many out there, there's so many colors, and different threads are great for different applications. And I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. When we were talking about the fringe earrings, I'm going to bring those back over. Fringe earrings are a great example of what different threads are needed for what. The reason that I like to use a thicker thread at the top again is because it's going to hold its shape, but then you want your fringe to be flowy, right? So there's two different thread needs in the same design. And so what a lot of us do is we make the top part in something thicker, and I'll talk about what all these are, but we would use a thicker, like bonded fused thread that helps you hold shape. And then we would come along and we would make the fringe with something more flowy, like a nylon or a polyester thread that's very, very thin. So what are threads? What are the different types? The main ones you're going to find out there, you're going to find nylon beading thread, which is things like Nymo, things like, you know, your KO, your 1G, and there's so many Eslon, Ceylon, all of those. Those are going to be kind of in this family of more like, they're not sewing thread, but they kind of look like it, right? And they're more in that family in the look and the feel. They're different in some important ways. They're often coated so that they don't fray. They're coated to be a little more sticky. And they also are a different size. They're going to be maybe a little smaller than your typical sewing thread. And you'll notice also when you get started that they have almost no, what's it called? I want to say outgassing, but you know how a little bits of things fall off of, well, if you're using like a cotton thread and you've used a sewing machine and you've looked at the top of that thing and it after a while has like a coat of dust on it, and that's actually from your thread over time, these threads really less likely to do that, way less likely. So they're designed for seed beading, but they're in a way would kind of be good for sewing too, I think. But fused bonded. So fused and bonded and braided threads, you're going to find those mainly in like the Wildfires, Firelines, and brands that are like that. I recommend these for beginners because they really help your work hold its shape. And I'm holding up a big spool. I'm sorry, I should be showing you guys. These are the ones that are at Michael's. They come in all these really beautiful colors, and they're the ones I teach with the most because they make it just so easy. They make your work pop. So, and that's because they're filling up the bead. And in a couple passes, they can do that. And all the shapes that you've made are going to hold their shape a lot easier. And they also they stick to each other. So when you've crossed one path of your thread with another path, it's less likely to slip and move. Whereas with these really slicky nylon threads, they're super thin and they're going to slide around, which is what you want for fringe, but not necessarily for like right angle weave, right? And then of course, just some other things to mention are like silk beading threads, really beautiful. I find it a little hard to work with for most bead weaving designs, but they're gorgeous in fringe. Bead weaving is hard because it's really easy to puncture and fray it. But again, beautiful and natural too. That's another benefit of silk. Beading wires. So there's a lot of beading wires out there that they come in sizes that are so small that you can actually do bead weaving stitches with them. And we've done herringbone and peyote with beading wire before. So it comes out really gorgeous. Elastic beading cord. I'm seeing a lot of this. This is trending right now. Are you guys seeing all the Instagram reels of people doing full up stitches like cuff bracelets and rope stitches with elastic beading cord? They're finding something really, really thin, put in it on a needle somehow and actually stitching with it. So all stitches could be done with elastic if you can make that work. I think it's tricky because you got to get it to knot and all those things, but in theory, really cool. And then monofilament is another one. It's invisible and it's really cool for things that make it look like it's floating. It can be used for stitching, and we've been doing some stitches with it. It's a less beginner friendly choice because it tends to like unspool itself like while you're stitching with it, if that makes any sense. So like you'll come along and you'll do a stitch, and if you've maybe even crossed it over 3 times, like let's say you made a ring, that ring will start to loosen up. So just something to think about. And then I saw a great thing to add. Thanks, Cindy, for your comment. So Cindy says that you don't need to wax Fireline and Wildfire, and that is true. And a lot of the nylon threads don't require waxing either, although you can if you want to. But thread conditioning, and I didn't mention thread conditioning yet. Thread conditioning can be done to, typically you'll see things like Thread Heaven or even just like a bar of beeswax. Sometimes I tell people you can just use a tea light candle. You just take your thread and you run it over. So I do that with Nymo, but I wouldn't do it necessarily with some of the other, like the KOs and the 1Gs don't seem to need it. And for sure, Fireline and Wildfire don't need to be waxed. They come conditioned basically. And I think if you did try to wax it, it would probably just kind of chip off a little bit. I'm guessing, as I've actually never done it, but it's not commonly done. It's not something I do. But yeah, you can definitely get thread conditioner for your Nymo. And it's the same for Eslon, Ceylon, and all that. Okay, let's see. So thread sizing. This gets a little complicated. I struggled with thread sizing for a really long time, so I thought I might spend a little time on it today. I've noticed there's a lot of different sizes out there in the nylon and silk threads. So they go from size A to D most commonly. There's others, but these are the ones that I see a lot and people use. And some of the guidelines that you'll see published will tell you A for 15, 11.0 with B and C. You can start using C with 8.0, and a size D, you definitely want to go 8.0 and higher. But in every class we've done with our 11.0 check with our NYMO, we're using size D NYMO. And the reason for that is, again, I'm teaching beginner-ish level classes a lot of the time, and your bigger thread is going to be, it's going to fill the bead up and it's going to hold its shape more. So this is where you have a lot of liberty to choose. You can work with any size thread that you feel works for your project. You can start with the guideline and then move up from there. A lot of stores though, will really, what you're going to see for sale are size B and D. I don't see A as much. I don't see C as much, but I see size B a lot. Size B is your KO, right? And size D is going to be the NYMO we have at Michael's and things like the Eslons out there. And of course, this is size D, the good thread. So I think that really the takeaway for what size thread, if you're looking at these are guidelines. These are not rules. Like you can definitely step out of this box and use whatever works for you. And if you can't decide what thread to buy and you only want to choose one, just go with a size D. You'll be fine with that. And then not all threads are measured that way though. So you're going to see this kind of measurement on your nylons and your natural fibers, but you're more likely going to see measurements that look like this if you're buying Wildfire and Fireline, monofilament, and things like that. Maybe even some of the elastics and stretchy cords are going to have measurements that look like that, maybe without the pound test for elastic. But your diameters here are pretty key. And we most commonly use 0.006 Wildfire. That's the one we're using a lot. It's again, it's the most beginner friendly one, and it also holds its shape real nicely. So for example, this was made with Wildfire. Still pretty flowy. These are very heavy beads. They're 6.0. It's holding it, supporting all of that structure. And when I put a stitch in place, it doesn't wiggle out of itself before I go on to the next stitch with the thread like that. So that's why you'll see this called out so much. But then if you're doing peyote stitch, for example, with peyote, I actually kind of like to go back and work with some of the more thinner threads because peyote has so much structure anyway. Same with brick stitch. If you're working with smaller beads, brick stitch has so much pass to it, like there's over and over and over again passes that it's structurally sound even with some of these other fibers. So I mean, it's kind of up to you, and you of course you're just going to want to get out there and try it. But if you're going to do peyote stitch like this or brick stitch, feel free to just go with your size D. I think if I had to just make one flat recommend, I would go, hey, peyote size D. If you're using small beads. Now, if you're going to go up to 8.0, 6.0, you want to be using some of your more thick threads here. And then of course, if you're going to do a bead weaving stitch, maybe go with one of these versus if you're just doing like a brick stitch or a ladder. And again, looming is a lot like peyote in that it's easy. You can work with a thinner thread and get a really nice result because it has warp and weft thread. So it has threads running this way and that way, which gives it strength. So you can get away with not having to use something as thick. And what else can I tell you? Let's see. Oh, so some of the bigger pound tests. So, and these again are just rules of thumb. They're not forgive me, they're not rules. They're just guidelines. You can stray from this, but a lot of the 8-pound heavier weight, you're going to use that for larger beads. And down here at the 4-pound test, you're going to be using that for smaller beads like 11.0, 15.0, 11.0, 8.0, and then 8.0, 6.0 here. If that makes any sense. I hope I didn't confuse anyone with the all these numbers, but they're measured differently depending on the brand. So you're going to see all these, they're equivalent to each other, right? Okay, so that's a lot of data. So don't worry, it's all here. You can just read back through it.
Danielle, I'm laughing with you, not
Yeah.
at you, because I know sometimes we always talk about, what if you don't have enough to say in a 1 hour class? And I
Yeah.
said, trust me, you will not have enough time. So I'm just reminding you now, you have 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh. And I didn't even answer any questions. Just me
Keep
rambling.
going.
Aw, awesome. Okay. Well, we're pretty much to the end. Not much left to cover anyway. We already kind of covered a little bit about what's the easiest bead weaving stitches to learn. And I had mentioned flat peyote stitches, kind of like that's the first one. If you're just trying to decide, hey, which one do I want to try first? Maybe go with that one. But they're all easy. They're all really fun. Brick stitch. I didn't put herringbone on here as a beginner friendly, even though I kind of think it is. And it's one of the first ones I learned. The only reason I didn't is because it does have some tension feeling, you know, I'm trying to think of a good word for it. It has the unexplainables, right? As you're stitching and you start, it's something you feel as you get going. And so that's why I didn't call it beginner, but like things like peyote, there's nothing more satisfying than the snap in place of that brick when you just go, and brick stitch is similar. It's just stacked differently. Like brick stitches worked this way and peyote stitches worked lengthwise, or can be worked lengthwise. I think there's variations there, but well, there's a class for everything, right? That's what you'll never run out of content designing for seed beads. You'll never run out. There's going to be something new every time you sit down. So we covered what's good for beginner, what's the most popular, and just to sum it up, peyote stitch going to be the most popular, mainly because it's just so satisfying the way these lock into place. It's an off loom, and it also is creatively liberating because you can do your own patterns. And then, okay, so how do I choose the right needle? This is kind of an important one. So needles are kind of a big deal. They come in a lot of different configurations, but the only ones I really ever use are hard beading needles. That's not to say the other ones aren't great. It's just that that's the one that I find works best for me. You can use big eye needles if they're not the braided kind. So there's two different kinds of big eye needles out there. There's the ones that open in the center, and those can maybe be used for stitching, but they're really, really long. And then there's another kind of big eye needle, or also known as collapsible eye, that are wires that are twisted together. Those are going to nick your thread and tear up your thread. You don't want to use those for bead weaving. Those are for stringing. Let's see, short sharp needles. Those are used in bead embroidery mainly if you're stitching onto like a backing. And then looming needles are long, and they're long because with looming, you're picking up your whole row, bringing it under the work threads, kind of pushing those beads up under the work threads, and then coming back through all those beads over the warps. And so those two passes stack like a little sandwich, and the beads lock in. And because some of these pieces, looming pieces, can be really wide, looming needles are long. So you can get all those beads on one, and you can use it to kind of position it underneath them. That kind of works. And hard beading needles, I'm going to go back to those and focus on those a little more here. Sizes of beading needles. So they come in, the most standard sizes I find are 13, and then there's 11s and 10s. Those are the ones that I use mainly 10 and 12. There's also size 11 beading needles, little variation there, but I think a 10 and an 11, not a huge difference between the two. The 10 is going to be a little bigger. But if you need to use something small and it needs to get around in tight places, like if you're using super duos, go ahead and use a size 12. If I share any tip at all, it's life-saving tip right here. Use a size 12 beading needle if you're super duo stitching, because the holes aren't going to be going straight in a line with your bead. And so you need to be able to get in tight places. So that's one thing I found with that. But then other than that, something I wanted to share is we do kind of recommend with our threads what kind of needle and what size beads to use. So you'll see tips like that on some of the packaging. When in doubt, grab a 10 and grab a 12, and you'll have what you need for every project. Okay, so here's how do I thread my needle? I think I'll just demo that. It's different for the type of thread you're using, but really and I have to credit, I learned this from another designer. The designer that taught me was Emily Miller. Some of you guys know her. She's at the, let's see, at Bead Shop. And she taught me how to needle my thread, not thread my needle. If that makes any sense. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And what I just did there, if you're working with fused bonded thread, so your wildfires, your fire lines, if you flatten it first, and this tip I have to credit Meredith Roddy, she taught me this. If you flatten it first with your chain nose pliers, it makes it really thin. This won't work on nylon. This won't work on your KOs, your NYMOs, those you just have to, you know, thread without that help. But if you're threading a needle with these ones, you can flatten them. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to take your thread and just hold it between your fingers like that, just so the tip of it's just kind of poking out. And with a thread that's like NYMO, it's going to be a little less like able to do what it's doing here, right? But in the general idea. And then instead of trying to stick the thread through the needle, bring the needle to your thread. Hold your thread as still as you can and as close to the edge of your fingers as you can. And then just bring that needle onto it. And that's the easiest way to do it. And this needle that I'm showing here is a size 12. So it's going to be your most challenging to thread. And if you're having bad luck like me, the demo gods are not on my side, flatten it a little more. And if it was NYMO, condition it. And it should just go right on. But it's tricky. And so just practicing is good. Size 12 beading needles, tiny little eye layer. See how small that is? It's really, really teeny. But that's going to help you out a lot when you're trying to stitch because it's going to go right through all those little tiny beads without a problem. Wildfires are really thick thread. And so getting it into a size 12 is pretty much impossible unless you flatten it first. Definitely want to do that flattening. But Meredith told me like you can, her quote actually is, she said you can get it through a size 13 like butter if you just flatten it first. And that's true for the 0.06 size. So that would be, if you're using the other brand, it would be, let's see, it would be your 6-pound test size. All right. And so, you know, and again, if you're using another type of thread, don't sweat it. You just want to maybe condition the end. You can always do the moisten it, right? And then try that too. Because what makes it challenging is the fraying end, really getting that to thread. And where are we at? We're at 5 minutes till. So frequently asked questions here at the back. I put a bunch of terms in here and you guys can read through these, but in general, all beading patterns that lots of people write start with things like leave a 7-inch tail. And what they're referring to is how much space to leave after you string your first bead and you cut the amount of thread they said to, and you bring it down. The amount that you leave here is your tail thread. And that usually becomes important later because they use this to create closures, or there's some other step afterward that, for example, next week when we do our fringe earrings, we're going to leave a crazy long tail that we're going to use to create the fringe afterward. And let's see what else. Other terms that come up, reinforce. That was one we mentioned when we were talking about right angle weaves. So like for reinforcing is going through something again. So let's say you make a ring of 4 beads, coming back through that ring, and pull tight. And it's go back to the first one, for example. But look how loose that is. It's still pretty loose. I can loosen it up just by touching it. But if I go through it one more time, when you hear someone say, follow the existing thread path, what they mean is do again what you did before. Just go back through all those beads again. You see, it's still moving right now. I could even pull it. But once I get through one more time, all the beads, they are tight. And so that's the first stitch in right angle weave right there. And look how much better that is. I could still loosen it if I really try, but not like before. That's reinforce. And that's the secret sauce in seed beading. If it's not working, go through it again and make it tighter and then build on from there. So then when I build on my next stitch, this stitch before is not going to move on me. and it's not going to jump out of place. So much more satisfying to do stitching with reinforced stitches. All right, weaving in, it's kind of the same thing I was just showing with following the existing thread path. So weaving in is just going back through your work, tracing your steps until you've made a couple of turns, maybe 2 or 3 turns, and then you trim it and it's not going to unravel on you. Finishing techniques. So this one, when someone says finishing, generally what they're referring to is either adding the clasp or weaving in, or both. And so my goal when I use the term finishing is typically I'm referring to attaching a closure and weaving in kind of collectively there. But it can be different things. So you just want to read the pattern carefully. Adding threads, another one we do a lot. We do this a lot in class where we throw our new thread in to the existing beadwork before we take our old thread out, or before we cut it. So like I would stitch until I got to where I had maybe 10 inches left of thread. Then I'd bring in my new strand into some of the previous rows. And then once it stops moving, pulling on it, you're good, you trim it. And then build some new rows with the new thread. You take your old thread and weave it up into the new rows. And that way you get flowy pieces. And anyone who wants to see that in action, come to our workshop. This is the button cuff workshop. We're going to be doing adding thread a lot. So you'll get to see that in action a few times. And last but not least, knotting. And this is a joke among our folks who come to our classes a lot. They know that I don't like to knot. And it is truly just a personal preference. And it is not, there's nothing wrong with knotting. Lots of people do it. Lots of great seed weavers knot their work. I just don't like to do it because I think it can sometimes show, or sometimes it makes it harder for me to repair something if it needs to be repaired. And then it can also change the lay and the feel, like the flowiness of your piece. If you were to tie like a super tight knot, maybe it would kind of cinch it up or something. So it's probably just that I'm not very good at knotting. That's why I don't do it. But again, nothing wrong with it. And we can talk about knots. We do in a lot of our classes what's called the half hitch knot, which is where you come up underneath, make a loop and go through the loop. Yeah, so that's like the speed run through of everything that's in the handout. At the very bottom, we've got links. These are links to all of the like beginner stuff that we've done. So we did a specific focus on beginner classes in, I believe it was last September. And so we covered ladder, peyote, and herringbone. Those were done as projects. And then I also have some shorts. We've done some short videos, which are like, they're 3 minutes or less that show each of those stitches, how to start them. And so, yeah, we're right on the hour. And no, maybe I didn't talk about knitting. We can do a knitting project with seed beading. I'm not a great knitter. I'm more of a crochet person myself. We have done some bead crochet. I can maybe point you to that class. We did, was it last summer that we did that? It was either last or the one before. We've been doing classes now with Michael's for more than 3 years. So we have a lot of content. If there's something you're interested in, we've likely actually taught it and we can point you to it. So yeah, there is a class out there for everything. And if there isn't one, I am always looking for ideas. So send me your thoughts on what you'd like to learn. And I'm always interested in hearing that. Thanks, guys. So
Danielle,
yeah.
you have a few seconds to wrap up, and I definitely the class that we're teaching next week is so special and so important. I'd love you to end on that note.
Okay, so you guys were seeing beautiful earrings today, the ones I'm wearing, the ones that I showed here, and then the ones we're teaching next week. So this design is by Marta Jewelry, and you can find her on Instagram at Marta Jewelry. She has a beautiful Etsy store where she sells a lot of other patterns too. We have the honor of teaching her pattern. And Marta is an artist who lives in Kyiv, and she's continuing to create beautiful, inspiring work throughout all the things that are happening in her world right now. And it's just amazing to me. It's amazing to me that, she continues to produce beautiful things. It's just, beading is truly something that unites a lot of us. And so it's an honor for me to be able to share this with you guys. So next week, we're going to make beautiful fringe earrings. And all of these patterns, you can get them right now by registering for this class. And then the one I'm wearing and the one I held up earlier in the green, that's this one right here. You can find a how-to video and the pattern on our blog, which is blog.johnbead.com. Okay, and so even though we didn't do a project today, if you would like to tag us when you create your work, go ahead and tag hashtag Make It with Michaels and hashtag John Bead, and we'll see your post. And we love to share the great things that you guys make. And until next week, we have this class next week. Join us, please, for that. That's Friday at 2 p.m. Central. And until then, happy seed beading.